Others, he's and she's. Welcome to episode number 124 of my anime podcast. I'm your host Yata, and joining me in the cast today is my co-host with the most, Naraku.
What's up, you weebelows?
Weebelows.
Different kind of weebelows today.
Welcome all to this latest edition of my anime podcast, this very special edition of my anime podcast. If you are familiar with the last episode that we did, which was a watch along of Star Wars Visions, we are sort of repeating the process, but this time with something that is not anime related. It's not even anime adjacent. It is the Wheel of Time, the new series from Amazon. Myself and Araku are both fans of the series. We've read the books in their entirety, maybe multiple times in some occasions. Some occasions. Does that work? We'll assume that it did. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch the first 3 episodes, which literally dropped today. It was supposed to be tomorrow, so this is quite the emergency production, you might say. We'll give our thoughts on each episode after it airs, and yeah, same form as Visions. Before we hop in though, a little bit of chatter, a little bit of banter. How are you, Naraku?
I'm doing all right. Starting to turn a little chilly outside, and there's a wind. The wind is not a beginning, because there are no beginnings in the Wheel of Time, but it is a beginning.
That was very nice. Very nice.
Thank
if you're
you.
familiar with the books, that is something that you will probably be able to identify. If not, it's basically the beginning of every book. You can't hate on that line. Looking forward to this. Cautious optimism. I'm going to say that. I'm hoping the pacing issues are not too fast. And I hope I do not come out of this cursing Amazon and their very existence. If that does happen, at least we have The Witcher coming up.
And Lord of the Rings.
And Lord of the Rings, yeah. I'm excited for that as well. You put $1 billion behind something, it's got to be good, right? Or at least it's got to look good, right?
We hope so. My optimism is I've been burned before. I was a big fan of the Shannara Chronicles, and that show turned out to be, let's just say, less than ideal. But I am also wondering how they're going to do this, of like taking a beloved book series that I've read a couple times, and I have images of everything in my head of how I think things should look and how I think characters should act. And then whenever you put that onto screen, it inevitably contrasts with your interpretation of it. So that sometimes can be very jarring. And to be honest, I often thought that Wheel of Time was unproducible because just the length and the breadth of the series is just so incredible. I just didn't think nobody would have the time or effort to do it. So I'm somewhat optimistic. I'm trying to tamp down my expectations so that they don't get ruined. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Amazon cranked out.
They have confirmed season 3 already, so at least we have a prolonged visit.
We do.
To the world of the Wheel of Time, so that's good. In other news, if there are other news, is I know Taka has been gone for a little bit of time. Don't worry, we're not like enemies anymore or something like that. I was going to say enemies anymore. We were never enemies. Relationship is as good as ever, and we will be seeing him in the near future. We've sat down and hashed out some podcast related ideas that we'll be hoping to work on in the near future, so stay tuned for that. Don't worry, he's not gone forever or banished to the Shadow Realm, or he hasn't been wiped out of existence by Bellfire.
He's locked up in your basement, let's be honest.
If I had a basement, man, if I had a basement. I've never lived in a property with a basement. That is not a thing on the Isles or Ireland
or Taiwan.
Well, they have basements, but they're just parking spaces.
Yeah.
I never had one of those, unfortunately. I live in a high rise and I'm high up as we currently are. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop out for a little while. We're going to watch the first episode and we'll give you our take when it is complete. See you soon. And we are back, and episode 1 is in the bag. Instant reaction here. There's a lot to take on board.
Holy mackerel.
Biggest surprise, Perrin been married?
I know, that's got to be we were both, when he said, I thought for a minute I misheard. And then you said something, and I was like, I didn't mishear it. And I was like, whoa.
Your life's already over. You're married. He's what? Ayla's at home working the forge. Ayla's straight out of the Vikings. And then, holy guacamole, the real big shock was probably him killing his wife. In the same episode. Did not see that coming. Like when we saw that he was married, or we learned that he was married, we were like, well, she ain't long for this world. But did not expect the twist of him being the one to inflict the wound. Now, I will say, I actually kind of like that in terms of like world building, because he has a very like, in the books, he's got a very complex relationship with the axe.
He does.
And the offending weapon, which he used to accidentally like kill his wife, was an axe on the backswing, because he thought he was, he literally thought he was getting attacked by Trollocs. Understandable. I actually got to say, let's go positive first. I actually really like the work they put into both Matt and Perrin, 2 of the 4 offending parties, the people that left the two rivers at the end of the episode. In the books, not to be like in the books guy, but I felt with those 2 early on, there was like no question as to whether or not they could be the Dragon Reborn. Because they felt like very kind of like side piece characters.
Sure.
Where in this iteration, they had probably as much of a sort of a fleshing out as Rand for certain, and not quite as much as Egwene. Egwene had quite a bit of time. She had quite a bit of shine.
I was going to say Rand's probably the most non-developed one of them, I guess.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
By the way, we should say that we are going to use full spoilers for both the books and the TV show, if you were unaware by now.
Well, it is an instant reaction. We have to talk about the first episode.
Yeah, but just heads up.
Other things that I liked, it looked good in places. Like the scenery was really nice. Shots were nice in places. I liked how they constructed the 2 rivers. Didn't like the fact that they didn't call it Edmund's Field, but whatever. It's a very, very minor detail, and who cares really? But it kind of irked me a little bit. I liked the costumes, the set designs, the city, the town itself looked really, really beautiful. I don't know. I think overall, no, you know what? I like the pacing as well. I like the fact that they spent a whole episode sort of setting things into place. My fear was when I heard it was 8 episodes and they were covering the first potentially 2 books, that it was going to be really just go, go, go. And no, they spent the time there they needed to spend to really kind of build the sort of this place, the 2 rivers, and make it feel like quite lived in, got a good sense of the world that these characters are coming from. And that will serve us in good stead as they venture out beyond that into the rest of the world itself. There are like a lot of little things though. Yeah. I'm not even talking about like
the big ones.
No, I'm not talking about story details. I'm talking about like technical details. I thought the fight sequences were dreadful. It didn't look good. I thought they went for this like handheld, quick, jumpy
shaky
style.
cam.
But if you compare that to something like, no, it's not a fair comparison, but like John Wick, for example.
Yeah.
While that kind of mad actions, like handheld camera style is going on, or even something like the Kingsman, there's still good fight choreography. The fight choreography here was kind of crap, except for there was a few sequences with Lan that were better, but there was a lot of just like very shaky cams, quick zooms in. Like it was almost hard to follow the action. Didn't love it, honestly. I thought the fight itself was kind of underwhelming.
Okay, well, my thoughts. I mean, I have what I said while we were watching this is I have whiplash, and I think thinking of it, I should think of it better as, rather than saying that this is the adaptation, I would say this was more inspired by Wheel of Time, because at least this first episode, because there are a lot of things that are in the settings and in the characters with the same names, but there are drastic changes from the books. And when I say drastic, I mean like stuff that potentially would change the entire narrative of the story. Now, I'm not necessarily against that. It's not a negative thing. And I think it's important for adaptations like Game of Thrones. Sorry, Adavarius.
There you go. We got 10 minutes in for the first Game of Thrones reference.
But like, or the Shannara Chronicles or something where they do set themselves different from the actual books that they're inspired by for a variety of reasons, and I'm okay with that. Though my love of the books sometimes is still too strong to be overcome yet, but I'm willing to give the things I liked. I like the production values. I actually like the fact that they kind of tried to make the world like the Third Age to make sure that it doesn't just look like generic Fantasyland 104. You know what I mean? Like the shot at the beginning with all the buildings that look like mountains because they've all been overgrown. Some of the costuming design, like I think Moraine has a holster that she was putting on at the beginning. Like she's got it looks like a gun holster. And there's lots of little things like the stained glass and some of the stuff that looks very much, I appreciated that. Clearly, the production value of the show is high, and I appreciate that. They didn't cheese it like the Shannara Chronicles cheesed it to some degree. So, I liked it. The fights, I really liked how the Trollocs looked. Oftentimes, I'm a little nervous that all bestial bad guys kind of look like orcs, and these didn't to some degree. They didn't look like Lord of the Rings orcs. So I appreciated that. I wasn't crazy about the fight. I actually didn't mind the way the one power was being used. I thought that looked decent. It looked a little CGI at times, but it is on a TV budget. And it's, even though it's got a lot of money behind it, hopefully that will improve. But I didn't hate it. I know some people out there, Daniel Green, hated how it looked. But for me, I was okay with that. I also I was thrown by the Perrin thing, but I also appreciated the twist. I thought that was very good. I thought the development behind Matt and his family was very interesting. I didn't particularly care about the beginning with the ladies, but I do like that they also kind of stayed in the Two Rivers for as long as they did. It did feel like a real place, and it didn't feel so generic fantasy to me as much. So I guess overall, in terms of production values and story things, I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess. You want to do the things we didn't like besides the nitpicky stuff?
A lot of the stuff I didn't like was actually production, honestly. Okay. I didn't like the Trollocs. This might be unpopular, but I will say it. I actually would have preferred them to lean more into the orc kind of archetype, because I think that's like a very dangerous, we'll say, or undaring kind of like depiction of the minions of the Dark Lord or whatever. These guys, I don't know, there was like, I liked the fact they were quite bestial, I guess, but I don't know, it just looked a little bit hokey, and that was always my fear with Trollocs. Like from the description in the books, I was always of the opinion that they could look terrible in CG.
Well, they look terrible. CG. They look terrible in the art.
They look terrible in
the cover art.
In the flesh. And what we got, I don't know, like it wasn't terrible, I'd say, but I wouldn't say I liked it. I'll say that. There was a couple, like, then there was a lot of story details that I was kind of like, oh, okay. Like, but that's just incongruities with the book, right? Like, Tam's carrying a Heronbade sword. He theoretically is supposed to be, like, we don't know this, and I guess I won't spoil it, but he's, assumed that if you carry that blade that you are quite a badass swordsman. Well, he wasn't.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing, because Tam is one of the coolest characters in the series, in my opinion. I really like Tam, and I always thought of him as quite the badass, and that was a little bit disappointing. I thought, actually, gotta say, on Moraine's fit was pretty nice. I thought she was her costume was awesome. The acting was a little bit understated, especially there's a lot of mumbles coming from Rand. I was talking like this with a sort of regionalist British accent. I thought Matt's performance was pretty good, which is kind of funny because I think he is the one that got recast for next season.
He did.
Maybe he falls apart in the later episodes. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I disliked more than I'd liked, but it's more like just kind of like, oh, that was fine. or a little bit underwhelming. Like, I can't help but compare it to other first episodes. And like, if I think of the first episode of Game of Thrones, there we go. There's number 2. And I think of the first episode of The Witcher. The Witcher is fresher in my mind. I think the first episode of The Witcher is better than the first episode of this.
I would agree.
I also think the first episode of Shadow and Bone is better than this as well.
Because that's a little bit of a stretch, but okay.
I thought it was really good because it didn't have anything quite hokey in terms of like.
That's true.
They didn't have to nail the cast or something. As I guess they did have those dark kind of dragony shadow creatures, but they're inherently like a flying kind of like lizard phantom is a little bit less potentially offensive in terms of like how bad it could look compared to sort of a 9 foot tall beast warrior, which like an orc is. The movement of the orcs is pretty cool. I'm kind of a little bit frazzled in terms of like orientating my thoughts. I will say that it wasn't as good as I hoped it would be, but it wasn't as bad as I feared it might be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, for us is, I don't know for you, but for me, certainly, is trying to separate my feelings from the books, from the TV show. I think it's very important for me to try to give the TV show, and I am, a difference, because, like, for example, Shadow and Bone, I had never seen that. I hadn't read that before I had watched it. So, like, as opposed to this series, which I've read, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, which is, so I have a deep love for this, and the fact that it's very different is something where, every time there's a difference, I'm like, and that's not really fair to the production value. So I or fair to the producers and the writers and actors. So I do want to try to give it that. Yeah. I will say there are a couple things that I am worried about. I didn't like the beginning of one of the things I really at the beginning, the explanation that men tried to, how dare they tried to, tie up the dark. And they were the ones that, and that goes completely against what the...
I was just saying, I didn't read that as men so much as I read man, as in like the species tried to do it.
Yeah.
Now, what I assume was Leandrin, the Red Aja, like that was very on brand for Red, right?
Sure. I'm
like, maybe the motives of it, like the idea of like they're corrupting it by touching it, that was kind of an interesting sort of take on things, because that's like literally opposite. Not, or at least that's not in the books how they sort of like the magic works, right?
Right.
Because in that sense, she's suggesting that there's a sort of shared magic between both genders, which I guess would make sense because in this book, one of the big differences in the series to the books already is the fact that the Dragon Reborn, which is like the sort of messiah figure in this world, could either be male or female.
Right.
Now, that actually stands to reason that what Leandrin said would make sense, because they would almost have to share something if they're always reborn. There's some part of them that I guess is sort of like eternal, and that might, now it's going to murky up a few things later on down the line when other characters are introduced, and
right.
But for the time being, that I actually didn't like hate that, because one, I knew about the change in terms of like there's a kind of he could be, or they could be any-gendered.
Yeah.
Going in, so that's fine. I had accepted that change already. I was prepared for that change, but Leandrin's comments kind of like threw me a little bit. But then I had to kind of like work it backwards in my mind. So that's a massive change if it has happened. Now I said I would rather focus on the actual show itself for this first episode than differences from the book, because that's not really like helping anyone.
I'm not so worried about the differences from the book in terms of the smaller stuff. I agree with you. There's lots of smaller stuff. The only thing I really found that was very incongruent from the main book is Perrin and his wife, and the fact that what she says at the beginning about the power, because that's the first introduction people have to the series. It's almost the first words being uttered to some degree of the entire show, and it makes it seem that, now I'm not trying to be menaced, but it makes it seem that men are the evil ones, and that they cause the initial, they are the reason they're causing the taint or the corruption of the one power. And if that's true, if they're going for that, I'm not necessarily against it, but that is a huge departure from the thrust of the show. of the
Of the
thrust
books.
of the books, of the narrative of the books. So if that's how I read it. Now it might just be the Red Aja, right? And their particular take on what happened. But that thing and then Perrin's wife are the two things that I was like, whoa, that is a significant change to the narrative. And I'm not quite sure. I'm okay with the smaller stuff, and I'm okay with like Naive getting dragged off by the Trollocs, even though that's quite a shocker to some
she's
degree.
like she should be, if all things are
Equal.
as they should be, probably in a crock pot right now.
Exactly.
Lining the stomach of a band of Trollocs.
Right. So, I mean, those three things kind of just are major departures from the narrative rather than the details. But like I said, I'm trying to give it's only the first episode. I think we should give it some time because there are other adaptations where I didn't particularly like the first episode. I agree with you. I don't think it's as strong as I wanted it to be. But at the same time, I'm not hating it like I did the Shannara Chronicles. When I first watched, even though I'm a huge fan of the Shannara books, when I first watched that show, the pilot, I was like, ugh. So hopefully, or, a live adaptation, anime adaptation, like sometimes you watch it and you're like, no. So I'm hopeful that, we turn it around and maybe this is a whole new story just set in a different kind of alternate world, a what if world, if you may. But I guess those are my three major complaints. I'm a little bit more forgiving on Trollocs and the fight choreography and stuff like that for the first episode. We'll see how it is continuing.
All right, I got two real quick points before we leave. I'm actually totally fine with the whole men corrupting the thing, because that will make a lot of sense if they play into this idea that male channelers are inherently a problem. If they're altering the sort of like lore of the world, that will sort of like play into the traditional views in the books of male channelers. Now, it might be a different root cause, but it sort of like will line up with a lot of stuff that will happen or could potentially happen later on, and a lot of like the perceptions of male channelers being sort of in this world, it might be a corruptive force as opposed to a force that is corrupted. We'll see how that goes. And the other one is, I guess, the little Empire Strikes Back line. Is it Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi? Which one? When Perrin drops the old "I love you" and she gives the Han Solo.
I know. That's Empire Strikes Back.
Cold. Didn't like it in Star Wars. Didn't like it here either. Come on, it wouldn't be that hard.
Oh, it's a classic line.
It's a classic line, but she didn't need to drop it like that. I felt like she bodied them. Okay, on to episode 2. We'll be back in mere seconds on this recording, but in about an hour in the real world. Until then. And we are back. Episode 2 is in the bag, and things are progressing very, very nicely. We are definitely action-packed throughout the course of the second episode. Constant sense of imminent danger on the horizon. Less gasps, whoos, and ahs. This episode, I guess, was less like meta world building, more so just kind of a chase. Although we were introduced to Shadow of Goth, which one of the high points of the series in terms of, so far anyway, in terms of how that was represented. I thought it looked pretty cool. Didn't love the
okay, let me say, there's two things that we need to talk about first. We got to talk about what do we think about Shadow Logos, and then we got to talk about how we look at the White Cloaks. Those are the two big, I think, things in this episode.
Yeah, what I was gonna say, I didn't love the mist, or I guess
the darkness,
creeping black mold that was just growing out of everywhere. Again, that wasn't my headcanon, and then fine, but it didn't look particularly great. Actually, there was a few moments here where the CG kind of just let itself down.
Yeah, that horse kill was not as great.
Yeah, the practical effects were fantastic, I thought, but the computer generated ones less so. There was a moment where Rand kind of like climbed a tower to look down upon Shadow Logoth, and it was regrettable that scene had to take place. Although again, the city itself looks awesome. The walls of the city as they approached it looked great as well. Very impressive Shadow Logoth. It happened very fast. Like I was a solid 10 minutes in there, it felt like. But whatever, This episode, and I think pacing wise, was a little bit more clippy, shall we say. We also got to see Beelzemon in this episode, which is like our sort of pseudo Dark Lord for these first couple of seasons, I'd imagine.
I prefer Ishmael.
Ishmael, but he's definitely Beelzemon at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I say we got to see him. We got to see like him on the
what
horizon.
We think is him,
Yeah.
because after last episode, we should not make assumptions.
Yeah, so we'll make assumes of ourselves if we assume too much. On the White Cloaks are one of my favorite elements of the books themselves. I love me some White Cloak action. And I was pretty happy with these boys. Pretty like devious, pretty scary, especially the Inquisitors, the Questioners. Emin Valda. He wasn't name checked, but that's the name of the character. Cuts a menacing figure with his collection of 7 rings and the hands of a yellow Aside just sitting there as you like on a chopped down log. Pretty cool like introduction to the White Cloaks, and that whole like dish that he was eating. Yeah, the bird that kind of cuts the inside of your mouth, but not too much to cause too much pain. But that's part of the sensation. You kind of like, he's got that kind of sick kind of mind. I liked that. I liked him. And then you got the cool like little duality of the White Cloaks themselves. You had them sort of like needing to go or feeling duty bound to go to the Two Rivers, to Tarn Ferry actually, which is like the border of the Two Rivers, to help the people there because it's been invaded by Trollocs. So you get this sort of interesting duality already at play with the White Cloaks, where they're agents of light, which is like the good guys,
self-proclaimed,
but they're also, burning women at the stake.
Well, to be fair, they're witches. I mean, that's always been. I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of the White Cloaks. I have always liked them. Actually, I thought one of their were criminally underused in the later books, but we'll let that go. I thought they looked good here. It's a little bit questioning of, but I'm all for it if they've uppowered the White Cloaks, because they kind of get overpowered to some degree because they're just mortal men. But Valda comes off as the actor did a fantastic job of being that overly positive guy that somehow in the back of your mind rings that, ooh, creepy, dangerous guy, right? Mm-hmm. So I thought the White Cloaks liked it. I know some people didn't like the outfits, but I like the outfits.
Like me.
Right.
I don't like the outfits very much.
But I didn't mind the outfits at all.
They're just not very practical.
Sure, but they're stylized and they're kind of, I would agree. But like, they're fine. I always liked guys that kind of wear stylized armor or uniforms or something. So I was okay. I like the idea that the rank is on their shoulders. You can tell the silver and the gold and who's the normal guy. So the normal soldiers. So yeah, I thought the White Cloaks were good. I look forward to seeing more of them, hopefully.
Oh, for sure. If they're like horning them in this early on, like I would be quite confident that we're actually going to see the White Cloaks again in the very next episode. Now, I don't think we're going to get Valda, but I think we're going to get Bornholm, which is the more valorous of them. Although that would not make sense because I think they expressed an interest in actually heading towards Tarn Ferry. But I feel like we're going to get a lot of White Cloaks in this first season.
From the books, we still got one more major encounter, right?
Yes, well, very like character defining.
It is.
Although in saying that, who knows?
Yeah, who?
Like literally, who knows? Like we've been off the reservation a couple of times. Although
this one kept pretty close to the original story than the other one did.
Yeah, they did. There wasn't like too much wild stuff. Rand was starting to be Rand.
Rand.
He's a bit of a polarizing character in a lot of respects. Like he's not a very lovable character. Him and Egwene are already getting to that. Well, they were getting to that kind of like tension. Where this is a kind of a classic thing in the books, actually. I guess the divide between more traditional Two River folks and Egwene. Egwene is very much like embracing of the exploration of the wider world, where everyone else sort of has to be dragged along a little bit more. And Rand is sort of playing the mouthpiece for that opposition. Nynaeve is not dead. My guess is that they might have just like discarded her. Maybe as she was getting dragged away, Moraine unleashed the lightning, and maybe the debris, and maybe the Trolloc that was carrying her Like she got hit in the debris. It would make no sense to me how they couldn't find her because it's not a big town. Like you're talking basically like a couple of hundred people.
Yeah, I think they're going to give her more agency than that. My guess is that she cuts herself or finds a way to get herself free.
Or maybe she accidentally channels the power.
That would be an interesting twist this early in the series for that to happen. That being said, I wouldn't mind that. I did want to talk a little bit about how the characters are developing. I think Perrin's still doing pretty good. Matt's still solid, even though I hope to see Matt's once he got the dagger, which by the way, dagger looked okay. It wasn't as bad as,
the dagger, I thought it looked like... Are you familiar with the Power Rangers?
Yeah.
You know Golgar?
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to say it looks like Tommy's whistle dagger.
It just looks like something that Golgar would rock. It's very...
gaudy.
It is. It's very gaudy.
Oh,
there's no mistaking that thing as like something of significance. This golden hilted red rubied. Like I'm surprised it didn't start like hissing and like burning at the touch. It was so ominous looking.
That being said, I mean, this beginning of this and what this leads to with Fane and all that is one of my favorite threads throughout the Wheel of Time is this kind of what Mashadar comes. I wasn't a big fan of the black mold either. I like the look of the city. If I had to guess, the city was shot in Prague. The show was shot in Prague. So I would wonder if that actually is a actual place that they shot, maybe the front door, because that looked like a lot of work. You know what I mean? And that looks kind of old world. Anyway, I really appreciated how the city looked.
I will say I've been to Prague. I don't remember that, but it's been a few years.
Or maybe I could see that being a actual front door of a.
It was giving me like, this is a bit of a deep cut here, but it is an anime podcast. Angel egg vibes, that abandoned city where all the whales would go through. Episode 2 better than episode 1 IMO. Still not bowled away, but definitely not crushingly disappointed either. I would say, I didn't do this last time, but I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 from the last episode, I would say it was a solid 5 in episode 1. I'm going to go to a 6.5 for episode 2. Trending cautiously and steadily upward.
I'm agreeing now that we've kind of gotten into the flow of the things. There's a couple things I'm still a little bit shy on. Like I said, Rand being himself, we're starting to see that. And for those of you who haven't read the books, Rand is not the most lovable of a character.
At the best of times.
At the best of times. And he kind of has a right to be to some degree. I mean, where you come down on that is a personal preference and debated endlessly over the last 15, 20 years. So that's the thing. But I think it might be off-putting for people who are not book readers. We'll see. Yeah, overall, I think it's trending a little bit upwards. There's a couple things I didn't like. Obviously, the wolf scene was interesting if you had read the books. I'm a little... the wolves, I thought the wolves were a little small. By the way, I called them licking the wound, even though my fellow watcher here was like, no way.
No, I didn't say no way. I said that would be just like a big leap in terms of like, well, there's no like precedence for wolves to have healing powers, especially from what we assume was some sort of Trolloc blades. It wasn't some random cut. And this generic wolf, well, not a generic wolf, but
Hopper, maybe.
It's potentially Hopper. Just coming up and licking his leg, and that's like how he heals. That's maybe I missed it.
It might be a jump.
I don't remember that now.
No, it didn't happen in the book. It's obviously foreshadowing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. They've split up, which I was a little bit surprised with what they did at the end of the episode. I'm gonna give this. I'm gonna actually hold my review for the very end rather than giving all three, because rather than giving one for each of them, because I feel like most people will watch them as a group. So I'm gonna try to give my actual number review for the third one after we've done all three of them, and then I'll look at it. But like, I was very happy to see Ishmael. He's one of my favorite characters. I feel like even though the bat thing was a little bit different, I don't recall that happening either. I'm not quite. We're a little bit. Would you say that Lan is a little bit off? For some reason, Lan doesn't quite strike me as Lan yet. Now that might just be there's a lot of screen time being devoted for everybody, and there's 6 or 7 characters here. So I don't know how much time we've devoted to him, but Lan still feels a little bit off to me. But the rest of the characters seem okay. We're moving along. The story's moving along. I'm excited to see what happens in the future. I feel a little bit like you, a little bit more cautiously optimistic going in from episode 1 to episode 2, even though the end of episode 2 had a little bit of a okay moment. But we'll see.
Lan's delivery didn't really impress me. I was kind of underwhelmed by the dialogue that he gave. Actually, speaking of a little dialogue, there was a really cool monologue early on in the episode I completely forgot about until this moment. When Moraine was recanting the tale of Manetheren, probably the best part of the whole episode, honestly. Rosamund Pike is a really good actress, and that was a scene that would be worthy of a quick YouTube dive, 6 months from now to a year from now. Oh, remember that scene when she explains the story of Manetheren? That was cool. And the little jingle jangle song, not quite toss a coin to your witcher, or what's the great one from The Reigns of Castamere,
right, from
Game of Thrones. Boom, Game of Thrones reference number 3. But it could be an earworm if we get more of it. I don't think we will, but you never know.
Oh, there's 2 quick things. I think her best scene actually was the fact that she had a really good actress when she met the White Cloaks. Like, she's able to turn her personality. Like, I really bought that kind of turn of personality from being very kind of almost arrogant to being very kind of, oh, I'm sorry, and stuff like that. Was a very good, I thought that was well done, especially with Valda right there. I thought it was good. We should probably really talk about this episode at an opening, which we kind of forgot about. I am a fan of the visuals. I am not a fan of the music that they used. It's obviously not Game of Thrones, reference number 4, which that is a banger, as is, toss a coin to your witcher. But the visuals were fine. I just, the folk music background or whatever, I'd never been a huge fan of that.
Well, I would say it was more world music. It feels like it's almost leaning into that sort of kind of like Celtic mysticism, like the Enya might put out.
I thought about
some
Enya.
of like the Lord of the Rings kind of stuff.
A little bit, and I just didn't feel it. It didn't do it for me. So I would say that I enjoyed the visuals. I assume the women are the Amerlin seats or something like that. That's my guess. I have no idea. But like I said, I like the visuals of the loom and everything like that. That was great. But I didn't really dig the music. Oh, something else we both agree on. Neither of us like those Aes Sedai rings. I don't think
very gaudy.
They are, and they I don't like how they stick up. Like it's not what's in my head, and I just don't think it was good production design. Now I'm sure it was designed by somebody looking to sell merch, so that might have had something to do with the design. But
yeah, I don't know. I just imagine something a little more classy, kind of like a wedding band with like a snake biting its own tail or something like that. But I also thought it'd be silver. I don't know why.
No, I think they're gold.
Well, they are gold, and they're like this massive gem. But I just something a little bit more like understated, especially for someone like
Moraine, who's traveling.
Yeah, and actually so many of the Aes Sedai in general, like they're not all greens. You know what I mean? And even the reds, I can't imagine would be like too concerned with this big, like clunky piece of jewelry. But whatever, like
it's a minor thing.
It's a minor thing, and it said her fit otherwise is pretty cool. So, and actually the fits in general are quite nice. I think they did a good job with the costume design. It doesn't look like they're just like, modeling the latest from.
Yeah, it does look like it's all like,
lumberjack
especially
chic.
Yeah, it does look like it's homemade, which is great. I really think a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, the Two Rivers folks, all their stuff looks homemade. I think that looks great. So yeah, overall, like I said in the first one, I think the production values in terms of costume design, thinking of what happens, how it looks with the gear. I even like the costumes of the the White Cloaks and stuff like that. I think that's all done extremely well. We'll see about the rest of it.
Well, let's see as we hop on to episode 3, the final one in this week's installment of The Wheel of Time. And we are back. Episode 3 in the bag, and quite an interesting episode.
Yeah.
That might have been my favorite of the 3, honestly.
Probably, I would agree.
Quite well contained. Got an introduction to one of the more important characters in the series, Tom Merrilin. Quite well portrayed. I wouldn't say he had the voice of a Gleeman in my mind. It was more of an acquired taste, kind of more of a troubadour than a all-round entertainer. Like, I couldn't imagine him dazzling in the court of Camelin, put it that way. But
Or juggling.
But he's quite a charismatic character, which is good because that's like a big selling point of Tom. I didn't like the fact that every time he got introduced, he'd have like the strum of a guitar. Like, just a bit too on the nose for my liking. But otherwise, it was pretty cool. Got to see an ale, or the remains of an ale, which is pretty
or however you say it.
Which is pretty earlier than I expected, honestly. But I guess they're traveling.
Who knows, indeed.
Who knows?
Actually, I was going to say my favorite part of the episode was the Dark Friend. I thought she did a really good job for just a guest role. Like, we kept guessing whether she was or not, and both of us have read the books multiple times, so we knew kind of what we were looking for. But I actually liked the speech that she gave to Matt when he first goes behind the bar. I thought that was good. I thought she did a really outstanding job as a guest actor. Matt's starting to be a little bit weird. I'm not sure. I'm okay. I also like Tom so far. Tom
Bombadil.
So I thought it was the episode. I agree with you. It's probably the best of them. It was in basically 3 parts, even though the main thrust is obviously I think Matt and Rand got most of the airtime there.
Yeah, they did most of the dramatic tension. Like, other than following a mysterious road and getting shadowed by wolves, Perrin and Gwyn seemed pretty much like wrapped up once they found the traveling people. Was the Tinkers?
The Tinkers. Yeah, I actually thought that entire sequence, except for, it moves their story along, and except for the shots of the desolate wasteland, which is kind of pretty in itself, I didn't really think that was all that. To be honest, I didn't think of the other 2 plot lines. I didn't think almost nothing happened it moved the plot along a little bit for them.
Something happened at the end of the episode.
Sure, but beyond that, I thought Lan and Nynaeve would have done, had more of a connection or more talking, but both of them were kind of being standoff, which, is somewhat of their characters. I just didn't think there was a lot of dramatic tension or storytelling. There's more potential there than actually was used, and the same thing with Perrin and Egwene. It didn't really do it for me. It was okay. It wasn't offensive. It just wasn't a major part of the episode. The Matt and Rand is much better, and I have to say that for a show that's keeping us guessing who the Dragon Reborn is, Matt is already my favorite of all the characters in the show. The actor that played him, past tense, has done a really good job. He's been convincing, and I've really liked his scenes, actually more than probably any of the other main characters.
Yeah, I would say so. I thought Rand had moments in this episode. He kind of redeemed himself slightly in this episode. A bit more levity in the character.
A little bit
less kind of mumbling as well. There was a lot of mumbling from Perrin and Rand in the first 2 episodes, where they were all kind of talking very low, and I don't know, they could have enunciated better. I think from I know it might have been less naturalistic, but it might have been a better delivery.
Sure.
You think of I don't know, how well spoken Moraine is, for example, or the females, or I guess even Matt. Matt's quite articulate.
Yeah. By
comparison to. It kind of works for Perrin because it plays into his character a little bit more.
They're being stoic.
Yeah, but with Rand, it was a little bit, I don't know. I didn't love it in the beginning, but, he was better in this episode. Kind of warmed up to him a little bit. Mm-hmm. This one kind of felt like a bit of a transition already,
Yeah, a little bit.
Again, I just kind of stress, if this was 8 episodes, and this was the 3rd episode, it could have, it was a bit bare bones in terms of, progressing the plot, really. But I enjoyed it, as I said. There was nothing really hokey. I didn't love the transition. There was I would call it the blood transition, without getting into too much details about what happened with it. But it was it was a bit heavy-handed. But no offensive CG. No. We didn't also have that kind of impending sort of threat looming down on us like we did the previous 2 episodes. There was a bit more the foot off the accelerator. Time
to breathe.
Yeah, time to breathe, which was actually quite nice. Kind of like the Tinker design. It's didn't love the dreadlocks. I think you said that.
I wasn't a big fan of them.
But otherwise, I can see what they were going for. I think they hit it pretty well.
Yeah,
it's kind of
okay.
You can see like the Roma influence, or the Romany influence, in them, and yeah, I thought that was pretty well put well together. Interesting conclusion. We chance upon the Aes Sedai we met at the beginning of the episode 1, which is led by a Red Aja, Leandrin, and
remember that name, folks.
Yeah, they definitely seem to be like foregrounding her as
who
one
she
of
is.
the prominent Aes Sedai, at least for the first couple of seasons. And Moraine gets to lock gazes with Logain, which in the books was Rand. Rand had that honor as he was being paraded through the streets of Camelin.
Yeah.
But I don't think we'll be getting Camelin in this season, or maybe even the next season. Who knows? But yeah, overall pretty good. Like, definitely, I felt myself warming to the show overall as I got to spend more time with it.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't know if I would go so far as to say it's like good.
Yeah, I would say I'm warm to it. Like, it's not offensive to me, but I'm not gonna rush out and be like, dudes, you gotta see this. Like, I don't think it's there. Now that might change, but like, one of my big worries with this show is that it's up against a lot of the space is being filled up quite heavy here. In terms of Lord of the Rings and The Witcher are due out next month. And Amazon's not dropping the whole season right now. It's going to go weekly. And Hawkeye is coming next week. And it's just one of those things of it's got to compete here. I mean, it's already got 3 seasons, so hopefully that will allow it to grow a little bit. But like, and The Expanse, which I still maintain is the best show on TV, is coming next month as well. So it's in a crowded space, and I really want it to get the eyeballs it deserves. And I don't know if I can run out and recommend it right now. I mean, a lot of my attachment to the series is due to my attachment to the books and to the world.
Yeah, I would say they got to work a little bit harder to get that deserved part of the eyeballs.
Right.
The books and it being an adaptation of The Wheel of Time. But I don't know. It's hard to put yourself in the mind of a new viewer and say like, what are you? Are you hooked at this point? Because there's certain points that are like, there's certain elements of the show that are kind of hokey.
A little bit.
But there are other points that are very well done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of green in the series. I don't know if you noticed that, especially episode 2 and 3. Really heavy, like green coloration. Where like with The Witcher, it's kind of like browns and grays. This and like with Wheel of Time, or sorry, not Wheel of Time, with the Game of Thrones, it tends to be more like kind of like
that's number 5
autumnal colors. Here it's a lot of greens, and you know what? I like it. I like the greens. There's a cool shot of Nynaeve looking for I guess some ingredients to make a poultice to put onto Moraine's shoulder, and it was like a very well done shot. There's a couple of really nice shots. There's a good shot of Perrin and Egwene having a hug at one point, and it was kind of like framed through this like I don't know what you call it, like mountain grass that was kind of overgrowing. Well done. Like, I think the shots could be like more cinematic.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, if I think of, well, Shadow and Bone had some very, very nice cinematic shots, and in 2021, you kind of expect those, like, with the technology and the budget behind it, you expect like some big moments. Now, like the nature and the landscape shots are quite like sustaining in themselves.
For
like,
sure,
they kind of like sustain your interest if you're like flagging a little bit when it comes to like the lower or like the more in between moments in terms of like plot. Like you kind of marvel at like how beautiful this scenery potentially is and how beautiful this world is. They still got work to do though, honestly.
They do. We were also both commenting as, I don't know what it is, maybe it's just about us, but we're both very commenting on that everybody has a Great British Isles accents. And Yata's a bit of an expert here, so he was able to identify what part of the Isles they were from. And it is funny, we were talking about that, and I was like, He's like, well, that's what fantasy does. And he's right. I mean, a lot of fantasy takes place in that it's got to be British, just like the Romans do. But I just thought that was an interesting choice that they've cast. Maybe they're all, British thespians. I don't know.
Well, like most of the cast that I've seen, because I've deliberately tried to avoid getting too into the weeds with production issues, like who's cast and whatever like that. But most of the cast that I've seen had been British actors.
Oh, okay. Well, that would explain that.
And most of the cast come across as like quite naturally British or Irish or, well, that area.
Scottish.
Well, there was a Scottish girl, yeah. The Dark Friend was definitely Scottish. And the Tinkers were definitely Irish. Or at least very good at doing an Irish accent. Especially Aram. Aram's accent was like dead on the money. Yeah, everyone sounds like I don't think anyone's putting it on. Maybe, I don't know if Lan's British. Because I don't think that guy's a very good actor so far. He's probably the weakest of the main cast for me. I think Nynaeve is really good. Her actor who was playing her is very good. Like, that's not my Nynaeve, but right. I'm definitely getting a sense of her.
Yeah, she actually was pretty strong in this episode. We were worried about the end of the last episode where she just showed up, and we were like, well, how did she get away? But that whole scene was not too bad, even though we wondered how deep the pool was. But like, overall, I was pretty happy with her, Deus Ex Machina escape. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Once again, some small things, like, did Rand channel to knock down the door? Like, that doesn't come across. Because he's not, supernaturally strong, right?
Yeah.
So, like, once again, it's one of those things of
that maybe his big dick Taviran energy.
Energy came in. Yeah. So it is, once again, there are some small things that I'm like, like we were both commenting on the town of Four Kings.
Which it wasn't called Four Kings. It was called Green something or other. She mentioned the name, the Dark Friend, and then it kind of like, once I knew it wasn't Four Kings, and it's obviously not Whitebridge.
Right.
It
seemed kind of small.
And went, yeah. Berlin got a name check though.
It did.
Potential Min show up in the future.
Oh, we got the Stone of Tyr name checked, and we got the Ogre Steading name checked. So
yeah, hopefully
we get to see those. Yeah, and we got the very interesting. I actually thought one of the great scenes was the cabin scene with Perrin and Ishmael, or
Baalzamon, yeah.
Baalzamon, whatever you want to call it. That was a very interesting scene. It wasn't in the book, but the intent behind the scene, there was a different kind of scene in the book. No wolf showed up. Well, I mean, this one it did.
Not eating his dead wife.
Not eating his dead wife, which I thought was a very interesting kind of. It got across that was an interesting thing. So, yeah, like I said, it's got some questions. I definitely thought this episode, like I said, is better than, it was probably my most interested of the three. Maybe just because I was invested more than the other two. And I agree with you. It was a little bit, it gave us time to breathe and to know the characters. There was more character development, I thought, in this one than some of the other two. So it wasn't a bad episode, but I will ask you to think, now that we've watched all three, what's your overall impression of the show?
I would say that it's a work in progress in terms of like whether I would say it's like a hit or a miss. But right now, if I had to like be definitive on it, I would say it's one for the fans, and maybe not for somebody who's has to be selective about what they choose. Like, are these three episodes better than, say, if you hadn't seen The Witcher, for example?
No.
I might say just go for The Witcher.
I would agree. The first three Witcher episodes are stronger than these two.
But if you're a fan of fantasy, and we are, I think getting any sort of high fantasy like of this production quality anyway is always good.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of like, it's just there at the moment. Like I can't think of like anything that it did exceptionally well.
Costume design.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's enough.
Yeah,
like I can say, like, the music is quite well done. The acting is quite good, depending on who's doing it. Like I think they said the actress who plays Nynaeve, Moraine, obviously is great. Matt, I think he's standing out so far.
Yep.
But it's just like nothing is like spectacular in terms of like the nuts and bolts of like how it's made. Like the shots are good, but it could be better. The acting's good, it could be better. The action is good, but it could be better. You know what I mean? And the CG kind of like varies between. Better. Yeah, it could. Like there's times where I was like actually quite impressed by it. Like for example, you know, I was kind of ragging on the Trollocs in episode 1, but I thought the Trolloc sequence in episode 3 was actually really well shot. As he kind of stalked around the pool, you get a good look at him, and I was like, oh, he's actually like, he doesn't look as, you know, as bad as I feared.
Yeah, he actually looked like he had some kind of intelligence in his eyes, right?
Like I just get real satyr vibes off them because of the
horns and
the goat legs.
The goat legs.
The movement is a little bit. That's where I actually think they let them down. I think when they're like, when it's just the facial shot or the torso shot looks well, but it's as they move where it gets a little bit clunky, in terms of like, it kind of pulls me out a little bit. Yeah. But as I said, like, you know, they were never going to be orcs, and they shouldn't be orcs as much as I would like think that was a safer play, because you know it's easy just to like put some prosthetics on some people and we have something that's quite believable. Sure. Trollocs are like they're quite out there.
Yeah, they're supposed to be.
I could see that being like a breaking point for someone who's not like versed in fantasy, but yeah, like I'm gonna finish it. You know what I mean? It's like
I was gonna finish it anyway.
It's got a passing grade.
Yeah,
like a C right now.
I would give it. I would give it about the same thing. I was going to say about right now. It's about a 6.5, which, if you read into my reviews on our Discord, plug, you know that 6 for me, or 6.6 to 7 is watchable but not outstanding or rewatchable. I actually at this point would recommend somebody who was not a fan to wait for the series to end and then kind of binge it, because I don't know if it's got enough pull to go week to week.
Yeah,
like,
it's got to show me something right now.
Right, like right now, like I remember watching the first episode of The Witcher, and the first scene is him coming out of the water to kill that spider thing. And it was dark, and his eyes are all black and stuff like that. That was a really strong first scene. And I don't have a scene like that here. Like I remember Shadow and Bone, which isn't my favorite series, but I liked it okay. I remember the first time we saw the sailing through the dark through the rift thing. Yeah. That was really an outstanding scene. And I don't know if Wheel of Time has that scene yet where I can be like, ooh, this is really what the encapsulates the series. So my big thing is that if it's just a show for the fans, it's not doing really good fan service, because it's changing some things that are really kind of, for me as a fan, I'm like, Now, if they're trying to make a show that appeals to the mass audience and then that we'll do fan stuff when we can, that's fine. I'm not against that. But it is something where I would be like, you're not making a show strictly for the fans. You're making a show that's trying to appeal to a greater audience, which is fine. But because of that, I don't know if I can necessarily recommend it to really anybody outside of a hardcore fantasy guy, which I'd be like, well, this is worth watching because it's got a production budget behind it and it's based on a legendary fantasy book series to watch it. But overall, I would say to anybody else, I would be like, I'd have to see the whole series through and then give the first season a yay or nay. But for me right now, I agree with you. There are things that they do well. There's potential here. Some of the actors I liked, I actually find myself liking, even though I hate her in the books. The actress that does Naive, however you say her name. And
you decide.
Yeah, you decide. And Rand is growing on me. I really like the guy who's playing Matt. Perrin and Egwene are meh. I actually think Lan is in a really tough spot for an actor because he's got to play kind of stoic and not like stone-faced, as they would say.
Yeah, I honestly think like if he wasn't tied up as Geralt of Rivia, it would have been like perfect
for Henry Cavill.
For Henry, yeah, because it's just like I just think you want a big kind of hulking, stone-faced like brute, at least at first, and then as you peel back. Like also like I think it's very unforgivable the fact that he got snuck up on.
Oh,
you know, like Lan is like, well, he's a badass in the books. Like, but he is.
Yeah, he's not my favorite character in the books.
He's not mine. Like I said, like you know, Logain, Galad, they're my boys.
I don't know why people like Logain as much as they do either.
Oh, dude, Black Tower is the tower.
Sure. But that's fine. I mean, I think he gets snuck up on in the books. To be honest, I think he.
Well, the tracking thing definitely was. That was a thing, but I don't remember her like getting I don't believe that there's a human in this world, ale or otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
Aiel or whatever, who could come
Sneak
up
up
behind Lan,
Lan,
you know?
Yeah.
The last king of the Malakir. Like, come on.
Sure. Spoilers.
Not
Yeah.
Valkyrie.
So
this now it's finally like, moving all of those like head words that you had read and putting them out in there into like into the sound space. Is it like the Malakiri?
yeah, it's one of those things of you recognize the word and you have a way to say it in your head. Like for example, the way the dark friend said Ishmael, she said something different. She put a different inflection on it, and I was like, that's not how I said it in my head. So it's fine. It's not a big problem for me, but it's one of those things where, yeah, that's one of the things that you always have a problem when you're reading a book series verse and then it gets made into a show. I had the same problem with Shannara where I was like, hey, that's not how, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was the weird. You know about accents? That was a weird one because you had like this mixed mess of like American accents with British accents.
With
like the
Kiwi.
king spoke like this, but his sons they talk like this.
Yeah.
And you had like surfer dude with his like, oh, my mom gave me these stones.
Yeah, it was that one too was very something. It's one of the reasons I've stayed away from watching reading the Expanse books until the series is done, because I don't want to ruin it and be like, hey, you know, that's not how they, because I know they made some significant changes from the books. So it's one of those things where I try in my heart to like understand the production, and Rafe, who's the guy who's in charge of he's the showrunner, and try to give them some leeway. But at the same time, the fan in me is like, So, you know, like I said, it's cruising along. I'll definitely watch next week. But it is one of those things where it hasn't sold me yet. So.
Yeah, I kind of. Now, this might sound like me like desperately seeking instant gratification, but I honestly think this series might have benefited more from just dropping all at once, aka like old school Netflix style.
Oh, right.
Because these hooks aren't particularly hooky.
Yeah,
like,
I would agree.
Where are they? We ended the first episode with the first episode with them leaving.
Right.
Fine. Second episode with Nynaeve.
It's gonna kill
sneaking up on land. That was never a threat. Right.
Well, we knew that was gonna happen.
Like, it was cool to see her back, but I think we had a sense that might happen. Well, it was going to happen. Otherwise, it would have been.
woo!
That would have made Perrin been married like insignificant.
That would have been a change.
And even her like meeting, or Moraine, I should say, meeting Leandrin at the end of the episodes, and we get this image of like a chained up Logain. That's like, yes, that's kind of cool, but it's not me on the edge of my seat. If I think of like, I don't know, like how how good binge-worthy shows can sort of just like leave you just, okay, I just need to watch the next one.
You gotta watch the next one.
Like, that's what I find with myself when I'm watching Arcane right now, because that's like a show that's coming out in 3-episode chunks.
Yep.
And I can't just do one. I got to do all 3 as soon as they drop, because it just has that sort of like they manage like that kind of like
anime
stuff. edge of like a blade to, you know, like ready to like,
it's that shonen stuff, right? Like the battle builds up and then they cut right before the battle, and then you're ready to go
like
to
a
the
big
next
dramatic beat. And like I said, I feel like they just haven't had that moment yet. They haven't had the signature moment yet.
Yeah,
like maybe the battle with like Moraine and Lan was supposed to be that moment,
but it wasn't.
Yeah,
I mean, it didn't strike me the same thing. Like I said, when Geralt came out of the swamp, that was like, man, awesome.
Yeah.
And then, or, you know, when they got on the boat in Shadow and Bone, or when, you know, Loki fights, you know, if you watch that series, when Loki finally gets, you know, captured by the TVA, that kind of stuff. Those were really like, wow, this is the signature shot of the series. And I don't know if this one has that yet. So.
Yeah, I wonder if they could like benefit from slowing down as opposed to speeding it up. They go for this like very visceral, like edgier seat, like I guess kind of like some sort of realistic fight style.
A little bit.
Or maybe, you know, having a few like dramatic slow motion Matrixy kind of moments where you could see the adeptness of like or the prowess I should say of Lan in combat, or of, for example, there was a scene in episode 1 where Perrin was like literally just like beating a Trolloc to death, right? And it was just like so fast and so visceral. I think that could have like benefited from, and that whole like sequence as a whole of the whole battle sequence could benefit from more like just like a bit something a little bit, I know it's a little bit artificial, but slowing it down and having it a little bit more dramatic feeling the weight of those punches because it was so incessant and so like quick. But if I think of that like compared to like Fight Club when the guy's like beating on Jared Leto, it just like it. I don't know. It just felt a little bit more like time to like feel it.
I don't know if it's fair to include Fight Club versus a TV show.
Yeah, no, it's just that one scene where you have a guy like whomping on it. Yeah, there's like because he was like just physically like he's bludgeoning a guy, right? And it's like very similar to what Perrin was doing to kill that Trolloc before he split the guts.
I honestly wonder
of the lovely
too.
Layla.
As I think about it, I honestly wonder too if it's the fault of the book, because the first book is it's not very impressive. Let's say the Eye of the World. I mean, until the very kind of end. I mean, there's lots of things in it I like, but for me, Wheel of Time didn't hook me till book 3. That was where I was sold, right? For me, the fight in the Stone of the Tear was the thing that sold me, and then the Journey to the Waste. So that really made me from, it's a good book series to I love it. So I'm wondering if the first book, and it's, it is very kind of, because I was going to say, one of the things that makes me feel like, one thing, I like the Fade, but like the horror element or whatever of it, it's very reminiscent. Like if I showed this to somebody, they'd be like, oh, that's the Lord of the Rings knockoff. And, one can say that the Eye of the World certainly has heavy influences from Lord of the Rings. So, I mean, maybe, they're trapped between a stone and a hard place. But, I don't know. But it is definitely lacking some kind of the secret sauce, right? It's made well. Nothing's offensive. So it's fine. But that's not a great indictment in today's kind of...
Or endorsement.
Endorsement in today's kind of packed, media things with so many choices. Of a fine show is not going to cut it. So I really hope, they pick it up. I'll be watching, of course. But for me, like right now, it's like a 6, which is watchable, but not recommendable.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Not overly disappointed, and I'm not like angry or bitter or like let down. I'm trying to think of like an example of being like just massively let down. Metallica's Saint Anger album.
The last season of Game of Thrones. Oh, completely let down.
Yeah. Actually, there was moments though in the series where I was like, that's very impressive, like visually. I as much as it gets shit on, I really like the Arya going through King's Landing and just like having that madness of like war all around her. I thought they really like did that quite well. Now there was a lot they did wrong, but that was mostly at a storytelling point. I think from a production standpoint, except for obviously the battle at Winterfell, which was a bit of a disaster. If you could see it.
Yeah. Turn the gain up on your TV.
Yeah, but otherwise it was like there was still production elements that were very impressive. And there was a lot of like cool, like that series was full of like nice little fan servicey moments, like when Bronn got to meet with Tyrion again, for example, right? And Pod was there, and like it was all nice, and Jamie, getting down with Brianna Tarth.
I would very much say this is a little bit like how I feel about Star Trek Discovery. Now, I'm sure Yata hasn't seen Star Trek Discovery, but Star Trek Discovery always it makes me sad because it's Star Trek enough that I feel, oh, yeah, this is Star Trek, but then it's sad because I'm not excited. It's not Deep Space Nine, it's not Next Generation, it's not even Voyager. And it has some good moments in it where you're like, ooh, but then some moments where I'm just like, oh, you ruined it for me, man. And that's kind of how, but that's not how I feel about this series. It's kind of, like I said, it's fine. It's like, I don't know, like a pasta that you get from a decent joint or a fried rice. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't fly to Taiwan to eat it.
And I think I could definitely wait, like, comfortably for the next episode. You know
agreed.
I mean? Like, put it this way, if it was here, I'd watch it right now.
Sure.
But at the same token, I'm not like, oh my God, a week? Only once?
Yeah.
Hook it to the veins. Like, it doesn't have that sort of, the same sort of magnetism. Whatever, though, that's not necessarily like a bad thing. Not many shows get that, like, on the mark, where they just hit you at a certain way in a certain time, and, you have to be in a certain mood almost for that to happen to you, and this one didn't happen. Yeah, 6. I think 6 out of 10 is fair. Maybe like 6.5.
I would say 6.5 because it is improving, but right now it's still got a ways to go.
Yeah. All right, I guess we'll leave it there. We should check in maybe later on in the series, like after episode 6 or something like that, or after episode 8. When it's all said
Maybe
and
after
done.
episode 8.
And we'll see if we changed our tune. Until then, fair listeners, I shall say bye-bye. Love you. Bye.
See you, Weebelows.